Irreverent, entertaining, cool. You're listening to LA Talk Radio.
You're listening to Peace Fund Radio with Ethan Dettenmaier and Adrian Paul, right here on LA Talk Radio.
Yes, we're here again.
Yes, good morning.
We're here in sunny Los Angeles. Oh, it's not sunny today. Look at that. Looks like it might be raining slightly.
It was raining on the way in. It wasn't raining for you?
No, it was kind of spitting, as we say in England. That's you're spitting.
Well, hopefully it'll rain.
But you know what? I mean, Texas has a lot of it. Actually, there's flooding in Texas. I got back there last week. It's actually so far. It was very hot there, but in the state of Texas, it's already killed 25 people and injured hundreds.
Terrible.
Yeah, they reckon that there's so much rain has fallen that it actually could cover the entire state with 8 inches of water. Can you imagine that?
That's
8 inches with the
crazy.
entire state. That's so much water. Torrential rains have given the state its wettest month on record. And, you know, you got river and creek flooding has broken all the records and swept away hundreds of homes. And there's about 37.3 trillion gallons of water fallen on the state of Texas in the month of May.
Wow.
Could we have some of that water
Yeah, I
over
was
here,
just gonna
please?
say, is
Could
there
you
any
ship some
way
of
to
that out
collect
here?
some of
Because
it?
that would be very nice. We would like to, you know... I mean, I do now. I mean, my kids are saying, "Don't run the water. You're wasting water." My son's who's 2, nearly 3, basically doesn't really understand what he means, but he's doing it. So turn the tap off when you know washing your teeth and doing certain things like that. So it's a very simple way to save water. I hate throwing water away now. You know, but water in a bottle. I'll water the plants with it rather than.
No, I'm the
throw
same way.
You know.
I'm a big conservationist with water.
Yeah, it's not great. So this week we're going to start with child protection. And it's going to be a great month, I think. We're going to have Kerry Elways is coming in on the 24th. He texted me yesterday, said he's going to come and join us to discuss about child protection, child soldiers on the 24th. We're going to be looking at that all month. I mean, I had a disturbing, before we get into that, I was looking at some stuff this morning regarding ISIS and the whole problem, what ISIS is now doing. I mean, they believe that they've killed 10,000 ISIS soldiers since, in the past 9 months, I think it is. But when you think of that number, 10,000 of them, that's just killed. I mean, there are hundreds of thousands, if not more, and they've taken over certain states in Iraq, and now people are saying, "Oh, well, you should actually go and give guns to the Kurds because they're the good guys." Duh! It's so funny because I watch these morons. I'm sorry, but even though you're state people, you go, "Oh, let's go give some more guns out." This is the whole problem. And I was watching Jon Stewart, an interview Jon Stewart had this morning, which basically states that the CIA even said in the 65 years that they've done it, giving guns to the wrong people doesn't exactly work. We gave guns to Saddam, who went to fight the Iran, who then we had to go in and fight him to stop him from going into Kuwait. And then all these, and now the ISIS has been turned around because of what we've done in going into Iraq. So, unfortunately,
we have a terrible track record of supplying weapons. You want to go back to the Bay of Pigs or before... even defending, China after World War II before it became communist, we have a horrible reputation of supplying factions with armaments and having it work out.
It's a mistaken idea because basically arming somebody just causes more violence. It causes more kids to get hurt. It causes people to be displaced, homes to be destroyed.
I agree. We tried to arm the Mujahideen against the Soviets. They became the Taliban. We've tried to arm other groups.
That was one of the points. Yeah.
There's been a lot of arming, and I think that kind of talk makes people feel like we're doing something. We're giving weapons.
We're doing something about it.
We're letting them do the fight. But I think, honestly, a diplomatic policy is really the only answer. Because here's the thing with ISIS. You could kill 100,000 of them. If there's 1 or 2 left alive that can remotely market their cause, it's never dead.
Well, you have the whole thing about that is actually they've started up now. If you look online, their Twitter links to an ISIS
of course,
person or whatever, has the amount of accounts that have changed in the past. I think it's 4 years. It's gone from 1,000 to 11 to 12,000 accounts.
Sure.
And so they are now using social media to gain territories in a sense.
And they hashtag it like World Cup, hashtag The Bachelor, hashtag, they're very effective with all this stuff. I mean, the thing about it is even if you were to destroy them, another idealist will come along with another strategy that we're going to have to contend with. And by idealist, I use the term loosely, but you're going to have to figure out a way to let the region govern itself, I think, ultimately.
Well, we're talking about that the Iraqi army has lost so many weapons, so many armor that they've
lost so many U.S. weapons.
Yeah, to the insurgents, because a lot of the insurgents are the Baathists who they will overthrow.
I know, and that's really laughable because we spent, $25 billion in 10 years trying to train. Yeah. I mean, I don't understand the average. American goes through boot camp in 8 weeks, but we were over there for 10 years trying to train a suitable force. I don't understand.
Well, remember, you're training a suitable force in its rank. A lot of them were being killed off as they were being trained, because so there's a lot of different things that are happening.
I'm just surprised that 10 years of training and flooding of weapons and cash, we couldn't get an operational group together to defend the country. But Saudi Arabia's got the third largest military budget in the world, I think, behind the U.S. and China now. It's something astronomical, and they're there, but they're not putting any troops on the ground. I don't understand it. Why don't we just let them?
Again, there's a political situation that works there. I mean, the Saudis were supposedly they also funded, from what I understand, also funded some of the 9/11 bombers. I mean, so go think, there's something wrong here in the way that we're looking at things. We
can't solve the Mideast crisis here on the show, of course.
Unfortunately, we can't.
Our involvement isn't seem to be improving it.
Well, I don't know what the solution is, but I don't think guns is the solution per se. And I don't, I've said before, I
think we should drop school books.
As long as they don't land on anybody's head.
Let's drop. I can make all kinds of suggestions of what we could drop.
I know you could,
to kind of mellow the situation out. But anyway.
But in reality, and I was looking at one of the videos that ISIS has is kids. The kids are reenacting beheadings. They're taking smaller kids that are probably 6-7 years old out to the desert with their hands tied behind their back as a reenactment to the beheading. So you're now training children to actually follow this ideology, and yes, Islam is not the whole thing at fault, but a German gentleman made a very valid point. Neither was Nazism. They thought they were a bunch of fools, and eventually everybody ignored them, didn't take a notice, and they ran the country and then killed millions of people in the process. This could happen with ISIS.
Yeah, I don't know if the parallel to the Nazi Party is the same, because I'm not sure what kind of economic infusion ISIS is offering. I mean, that's what really brought the Nazis to power, is they were able to bring a country out of recession and give everyone hope and allow them to eat again, essentially. That was one of the selling points. And I don't know what ISIS is doing in their occupied regions.
Well, you're dealing with a different type of mentality and economic region as well. So
your point though is a very alarming one, and it's a fact that we've known for a long time. If you get them as kids, it's hard to break them of those habits. And
absolutely,
if you teach them that beheading is the way to go, they're probably going to believe that for the rest of their lives.
I always remember an image that's always been burned into my head since many years. I remember when between the Palestinian and the Israelis, when there was a thing in Palestine where there was this father holding his son, and he had an AK-47 or a Kalashnikov or something in his hand, and he gave it to his son, and the son couldn't hold the rifle up, so he raised his son's hand. The son was probably 6 years old. Raised his son's hand in the air with the weapon. And to me, it's just wrong. That person there, if he's not dead already,
I'm sure,
is now still living with that type of mentality.
The path of violence doesn't bring any rewards. So even if you're alive, if you're fortunate enough to be alive, it's hard. It's hard to imagine you're living the life you really want. If that is if that's going to be the road you travel, of carrying a gun or pushing guns on children, or making sure the young 6 and 7-year-olds can raise guns in the air. I mean, the fact of the matter is there's a lot of anger there with that. And,
yes.
We have to kind of figure out what's the root of a lot of this. I mean, I know the quick thing for a lot of people in this country is extermination, or let's go in there and do it. It's not really, first of all, it's not our backyard like we like to think it is, and we can't afford to go in there. Personally.
Well, it's not our backyard because, like John Stewart said, well, maybe we should have just left it all alone until the oil ran out, and then nobody would have given a damn.
That's absolutely true, and that's what it really comes down to. I think, honestly, look at the regions over there that have no oil.
And there's no
or heroin.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's no oil heroin, and we're not really caring too much about it, right?
Look, all kids have the right to be protected from violence, exploitation, and abuse. It's simple. You've got millions of children worldwide from socioeconomic backgrounds, all ages and religions and cultures. They suffer violence, exploitation, abuse every single day, and millions more are at risk. You've got girls and boys in particular are vulnerable because of their gender, their race, their ethnic origin. And the higher levels of being vulnerable are actually often associated with children with disabilities who are orphaned, indigenous, from ethnic minorities and other marginalised groups. These risks that are associated with with living and working on the streets, or living in institutions of detention, living in communities where there's inequality, unemployment, and poverty. These are the highly concentrated beds where these issues occur. And whether they get them as soldiers, whether they get them for child prostitution, these kids need to be protected. You've got, and when a natural disaster happens, like in Nepal, I guarantee you there are things happening out there that we really don't want. Kids that are displaced. That's why the Peace Fund went into Thailand. When the kids were displaced, yes, there were adults still helping the kids that had lost their parents, etc. But with a natural disaster, a wandering kid is now prey. And you've got armed conflicts, displacement. It exposes these kids, child refugees. These predators, I would call them, go in and take these kids and sell them. And this is another thing we were discussing the other day regarding taking a photo of your child. Everybody out there must be very aware, and I know we've highlighted this before, but you've also got to be very much aware that when you have a photo of your child, do not put it on the internet. Do not show the badge of the school that they're going to. Do not show a sign behind them that shows where they're going to school, because there are sites out there that will see that photo. They will take that photo and they will put it on a site that says, this child you can have for $5,000. They will then kidnap that child. It has happened. So don't be dumb enough to actually put it out there so that everybody can see it. Use a little common sense. Take the meta tags off. Don't put the in your iPhone or your phone where it shows where that photo was taken, because there are predators out there. Because of the internet, they can find things much easier than they could before. That's my rant for this morning. Not off my rant. But
is that it? That's the best you got?
That's just the beginning of it. I mean, there's so many issues that really have to get out there. Yeah, I know it's. But let's look at some facts. Globally, amongst 27 million people, they're subject to modern slavery. 27 million. That many holding hands is enough to circle the globe, the entire globe. 26% of slaves today are children under the age of 18. And the victims of slavery can be as young as 5 or 6 years old. I mean, it's the second largest global organised crime. It's $150 billion a year. It's huge. We don't realise it. We sit here, we go, I don't get the right food, I don't get the right schooling. There are much greater issues at stake. Until we solve some of these other issues, the problem is the poverty that you find radicals from, in whatever sense, whether they become soldiers, whether they become sex slavers, whatever. You've got Haiti, you've got different countries around the world that are economically struggling, and therefore the people need to find a job and get money. And what do? They go and prey on those people that are less fortunate. You have 600 to 800,000 people trafficked across international borders every year. 50% of those are kids. Data from the World Bank indicates that 168 million children aged 5 to 17 are engaged in child labour. That's some 150 million. Among them are below the age of 14. 150 million kids are below the age of 14 in slave labour. Think about it. Would you want your kid doing that? I couldn't even imagine putting my kids through that. Slave labour contributes to the production of at least 122 goods from 58 countries worldwide. Check those goods out. Stop buying them.
Do we have a list of those goods?
We should get those goods. Actually, that would be a good idea. If anybody had a list of those goods, we should put them on our social media site. Any of you listening right now, take a check of that, because 58 countries worldwide are contributed to slave labour. And we actually we may have an organisation coming on to talk to us about that. But I'll bring that on one of our other weeks. The biggest country at fault is India. India has a horrifying 14 million kids in slave labor. India is one of those places that is now coming up to be a very wealthy country because of the technology that they have. They have a great ability to export their knowledge and go away and gain all the internet knowledge. All your call centers for AT&T and everywhere else comes out of India now from the people. So you're not calling your local AT&T, you're calling somebody else or another. It might not be AT&T, but other call centers from around the world are actually from that region. And yet there are still many of those people and children living in India that are being abused, and modern day slavery has not stopped. We've caused in this country to we had that issue with the African Americans for many years, and yet we stopped it. It doesn't mean you're going to change people's opinions. You just have to stop the fact. Silence. I think it's a sobering thought. That's a lot of sobering stuff. I mean, I don't know about you, Ethan, but listening to those facts and those numbers, it's kind of difficult to even imagine living in a thing like, because we're safe in a lot of our Western worlds. We drive nice cars. Even if we don't drive a nice car, we're still driving a car. You're still going to be able to eat. Right. You're not being forced to do something. And I've discussed this with education before. We talk about kids, and I'm watching a program right now called Peaky Blinders, which is kind of
How is it?
It's a great. I love it.
How long did it take you to love it, though?
It took me a few episodes to get into it. It took me a few episodes to get into it, and I understand it. But it is. But the interesting.
Speaking of arming insurgents,
well, exactly. But that was the interesting thing that came out of when you're looking at the Peaky Blinders is about a story of black Birmingham gang, if you like, back in the early 1920s. Or late 1919s, when all the soldiers came back from war disillusioned about fighting in a foreign country. And they had nothing, and therefore they could band together and do things such as betting. And betting begat violence. And I remember when, back in the 50s and 60s, that mentality of gang nature in the United Kingdom, it still exists.
The Krays?
The Krays, yes. The Krays lived, actually, they were from around my area. Mm-hmm. They were a very violent gang. And yet these came from disillusioned people. And this is the same thing that we're dealing with here. People that are disillusioned. Slavery is illegal in every country, and yet it still exists.
Yeah.
In secret. I mean, so you've got to look at that. That's, to me, is the same type of thing, because what I've noticed in that series is that it doesn't matter how legitimate you want to make it, there's always somebody that wants to take your position. There's always somebody that wants to be better than you. There's always somebody that's going to be more violent than you to do it. So arming somebody, giving them a gun to say, well, we've got a problem over here, let's arm somebody else. Well, that arming that person or giving them guns or that's your violent solution to the problem is going to beget more violence. It doesn't stop it. Let's talk about slavery just a bit. Here's some horrific examples of modern day slavery. Obviously we know the slavery back in the United States. Many years, the pictures we've seen before. I mean, I've seen them in my writings. One of our actual projects deals with slavery, and the pictures are horrific, but they're no less horrific today because you might not even have known these exist. Ivory Coast, chocolate slavery.
Chocolate slavery?
That's what it's called. Because
do they make chocolate there?
Well, you see, no. The reason is because kids light up when they get a chocolate treat. But there are children who are actually slaves to the chocolate industry. They're so controlled and abused that they don't even know what chocolate is or what it tastes like. Ghana, the Ivory Coast, where 60% of the world's cocoa is produced, illegal child labour is carried out on a daily basis. If you look at your cocoa, there's two types of cocoa. I've got to learn what those are, but there's one that is the regular one and one that is a little bit more expensive because It's harder to farm. But some children have parents who are cocoa farmers, others are trafficked and forced into a life tending the fields. There's an estimated 500,000 child slaves working in the cocoa fields in depressing conditions. They're often orphaned, homeless, or smuggled by force by promises of a better life. So that's one thing. Your chocolate sometimes is coming from a child that is so small they're cutting grass with a machete. They can be 3 or 4 years old just cutting grass. That's still slave labor. The government blames the cocoa industry while the cocoa industry blames the government. Of course they do. Everybody blames everybody else. You've got proposed legislation to guarantee slave labor-free final products. It was shot down after pressure by the industry giants. You've got a BBC undercover journalist discovered that even when a chocolate bar is stamped with fair trade seal, there's still many child labour concerning issues during its production. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's done. Now, here's another one, the mines. Mm-hmm. You've got... it's a dangerous profession. It's one of the most dangerous professions in the world, and you need well-trained adults in regulated mines. Imagine how dangerous it is for the estimated 1 million children in Africa, Latin America, Europe, and Asia that work in unregulated mines. From the age of 3, children are intimidated and forced to work hours for little or no pay and work in shifts at 24 hours at a time, while girls are often forced into prostitution. There's a higher risk for short and long-term health effects due to chemicals, dust, and deadly metals in the air while they're doing that. Their growing bodies can be permanently deformed because the strain of carrying heavy loads, and their respiratory systems suffer because of the dust inhalation, the toxic chemicals and metals. They do serious damage to their nervous system. So this is another one. Another one is harvesting child organs. Now, I heard about this issue. This is even happening in places. I heard of something happening in Hungary when I was there.
I don't doubt that for a second.
Yeah, it was athletes. They found young athletes who were, fit, very fit, that they would kill them and they'd find their heart removed or their liver removed or whatever. Harvesting child organs, it's a high demand. Organised gangs often traffic children to sell their organs on the black market. Haiti is one of the biggest hotbeds of exploitations in the wake of the 2010 earthquake. We talked a little bit before about how natural disasters can do this. It left tens of thousands of children orphaned. And even with their strict regulations placed in organ transplants, black markets thrive because people are desperate for transplants they fear they may never come through legitimate means. It's an approximate 70,000 kidneys come annually from the black market worldwide. 70,000.
70,000 kidneys?
70,000 kidneys.
That's unbelievable.
These things... okay, let's go another one. There's another one. Camel jockeys in the Persian Gulf. When you think of horse jockeys, you probably imagine very small people wrestling, speeding horses between their legs. And, they do the same sort of thing with camel jockeys, only it's children riding camels, and the children are normally slaves. There's approximately about 30 more boys as young as 2 are abducted monthly from Pakistan to work as camel jockeys. 30 or more boys a month are abducted monthly from Pakistan to work as camel jockeys. These slave owners buy the kids so young because 2-year-olds are good at riding camels. It's not because they are, but because they're acquiring them at that age means that there's more time for them to deliberately stunt their growth and prevent weight gain so they can ride the camels. Think of this. This is what people do on a daily basis.
It's just amazing how quick people will exploit the human race.
Exactly. We're so far ahead, and yet in many cases we're so far behind in so many different things. It just which reminds me, is John Bealey? Has he joined us yet this morning?
He's here.
Is he, are you there, John?
Good morning, Adrian. Good morning,
John.
Ethan. How are you guys this morning?
Good morning.
Good. Just ranting this morning about the amazing parts of things that these things go into. I mean, I have...
Well, as well you should. These numbers are
staggering.
unreal.
They're staggering. I mean, these little camel jockeys, stunting them, they basically start racing at the age of 10. Even though it's illegal for anyone under the age of 14, and if they don't live up to their master's expectations, they can be tortured and left for dead.
Yeah.
That's it. That doesn't work. Okay, next one. Put it out. Get rid of it. Same thing as... I mean, unfortunately, I live in an industry where action was one of the things. And in China, when you've got stunt players that are a dime a dozen, one breaks his leg, he just gets thrown to the side and another one will come in because there's thousands and thousands that want to do the job and want to get out of poverty.
Right.
So, these numbers are staggering this morning. And even the kids that escape this, they face an uphill struggle because they're going to have, they face abuse, and which can affect lifelong, it can affect them for their entire lives, which includes mental and physical disabilities. One of the actual organisations that's working on this is UNICEF. They're trying to end this by encouraging the use of robot jockeys that jostle the camels to race. So, but there are other things. Cannabis farms in Scotland, shrine slavery in West Africa.
You can grow cannabis in Scotland?
Well, this is what it is. Cannabis in Scotland. Children from places such as China and Vietnam are being trafficked into Great Britain. And being forced to work in indoor cannabis farms throughout the island, many of which are located in Scotland. This is news to me. These farms are usually run by organised gangs inside gutted buildings where the windows are blacked out and the doors are locked at all times. They have kids as young as 13 left there 24 hours a day, where they have to tend to the thousands of cannabis plants. There's an estimated 300 children are trafficked into the country every year. And these kids are not given any access to natural light, only knowing the day by the heat lamps, and that they've got to keep the plants growing. So even in this, I mean, the UK is cracking down on cannabis farms, but you've got victimised children are often being charged with cannabis cultivation and being sentenced to prison time. Those kids who don't go to jail are put into foster care. So while they're in care, the gangs that coerce them into slavery continue to harass them and scare nearly 2/3 of the children into returning to the farms. So how do you stop that? I mean, the interesting thing is a lot of these things that are illegal should be illegalised and controlled, and that way you get rid of the gangs. Although the problem is you have these people coming from places that are that have socially economic challenges, and therefore they're going to find something else to actually use their trade on.
Well, it's a problem too, and the people who are enslaving these children have no incentive to stop. I mean, it's not like a situation where you can say, okay, well, we're going to put some economic sanctions on these guys. Well, these guys, the slavery is a $150 billion per year industry. They're doing just fine. They're not concerned about economic sanctions and things like that. They have no incentive to stop, and that's where we need to focus on, I think.
Well, there's so many. They've got the dancing boys of Afghanistan, where the kids are actually forced to dance and wear clothes for men who are interested in boys, because it's banned for women to dance. And you've got the beggars in Senegal, when the kids are off. There's 50,000 kids made to hit the streets to beg for money. Now, I've seen this for myself in Romania. In Romania, I've seen gypsy kids amputated and their legs crushed so that they will be more sympathetic to beg on the streets. Think about that. Think about taking your child, taking a hammer and smashing its foot to pieces, or taking your child and cutting its leg off. Think about that.
It's
wow.
Yeah,
it's just.
What do you say?
There's not much we can say here. I mean, there are so many. There are organisations making a difference that I want to highlight. Actually, let's talk about. When we get to those organisations in a question, I want to actually let's talk about some pleasant stuff this morning, John. Let's talk about some updates that you've got for us. Some great little stuff we've got going on here.
Well, I tell you what, it's every week on Peace Fund Radio you hear statistics and information about harm to children. It's difficult to hear and it's difficult to talk about, but it's important to talk about it, because every time these issues are spoken of and we get that information out there, somebody's going to hear it, possibly somebody who might decide to step up and make a difference themselves. And we have so many heroes of the week, children who have stepped up to the plate over the years that we've been on the air here, who have heard information such as what we're presenting today and done something about it. And I want to talk really briefly about some of those kids. We had Neha Gupta. Neha is 19 years old now. She's from Pennsylvania. But when she was a child, she would visit her grandparents in India. And the family had this tradition that on your birthday, rather than receiving gifts yourself, you would go out into the village and give food and gifts to the orphan children. Now, Neha had done this for several years, but by the time she was 9 years old, she began to realize two things. Number one, the disparity between the quality of her own life and the orphans that she met. And number two, she realized, okay, I'm feeding these kids today, but who will take care of them tomorrow? And for Neha, at 9 years old, the answer was, I will take care of them. So she founded an organization called Empower Orphans, which you can find at empowerorphans.org. She has raised $1.7 million over the last 10 years to build homes, schools, to provide health care to orphans in India, the very same children who are on the verge of crime and prostitution and sexual slavery. She's giving those kids the education and the safety that they need to make their own choices, to build their own lives. We had Vivienne Harr, who called into the show. When she was 8 years old, she started a lemonade stand because she saw a picture in a book of two small children dragging a rock. And she asked her father, Eric, Daddy, why are these little boys dragging a rock? And her father said, well, Vivienne, those kids are slaves. She couldn't believe it. So at 8 years old, she starts her lemonade stand. She raises $100,000, which was used to free children from slavery. And now at age 11, she is one of the top advocates for children in the world. When the Boko Haram situation was going on last year, where these animals abducted a bunch of schoolgirls and were selling them, she was one of the biggest voices on social media and in the news, bringing attention to what had happened. And she was 11 years old. And you think, why aren't some of the adults and some of the governments in the world doing as much and working as hard as what some of these kids are? It's incredible. Another young man named Kylesh Sharma. He was 14 years old in 2010 when he started his own chapter of something that's called Nepal House. And you can find him at nepalhouse.net. 1 year after he started it, he had already built his first school for girls in Nepal, where sexual slavery is unfortunately a pretty rampant thing. And he has teachers and counselors who work with the girls who are survivors of prostitution, of sexual slavery, to give them counseling, to give them education, to help them learn economic skills and entrepreneurial skills to, again, take back their own lives. It's incredible what they're doing. You can visit Kylesh at nepalhouse.net. We had Helen Ma a couple of years ago. She called in from Free the Children at freethechildren.com. That organization was founded in 1995 by Craig Kielburger. And in the 20 years since its founding, Free the Children has impacted 2.3 million children with $16 million worth of medical supplies, in addition to education and empowerment. They educate 55,000 children a day, and they've given 30,000 girls the power to rise above slavery by teaching them, again, those entrepreneurial skills, education, the things they need to chart their own paths. When Craig founded the organization, he was 12 years old. Again, children who have heard numbers like the ones that we're giving you today and decided that they were going to do something about it and have done some extremely successful things in that regard. It's amazing.
I remember that story. It was one of the first you actually brought us, John. So it was always very, it was very inspiring to hear that type of thing from a young man like that.
It is. And, that brings us to our new hero of the week, Kendall Ciesemier of Wheaton, Illinois. Kendall is currently a fourth-year student at Georgetown University, but she has been an advocate and a fighter for children's causes for a very long time. Back in 2004, when Kendall was 11 years old, she was watching the Oprah Winfrey Show, and the episode was about the plight of AIDS orphans in Africa. So Kendall marches upstairs. She collects her entire life savings of $360. She carries it down to her mother and says, "Mom, I want to adopt a child in Africa." And again, she's 11 years old. She wants to adopt a child in Africa. So her mother says, "Well, let's see what we can do." And they do some research, and they sponsor an 8-year-old girl named Benit from Mauritania. After they sponsor this girl, a few months go by, Kendall gets a letter in the mail from Benit that says, "You changed my life. I was able to go to school for the first time in my life." And like all of our heroes of the week, lots of times they'll help that one person, they'll help one other child, and they get that fever and realize, I actually can make a difference. And so Kendall decided that she was going to dedicate herself to helping as many children as she could. Unfortunately, Kendall was facing a battle of her own. She was born with a very rare liver disease called biliary atresia, which basically affects your bile ducts. There's very complicated surgery that's often done to infants who have this, where they have to go in and cut away portions of the infant's intestines and fashion those pieces of intestines into new bile ducts to try to make sure that the liver functions correctly. It's not a permanent solution. So by the time she was 11 years old, Kendall had to undergo not one, but 2 liver transplants. So, of course, her family, friends, the community, classmates, everybody comes together and says, Kendall, we're here to help you. What can we do to help you get through these painful surgeries, this very scary time in your life? And her answer was, give me money, but not for me. Her classmates were able to raise enough money to help her sponsor, this is amazing, sponsor the entire village of Musel in Zambia. And again, she realized, okay, well, we can do more. We can go bigger. So children around the country start hearing about what she's up to. The word spreads, and she she starts getting all these donations in her name from kids around the country, $15,000 worth. $15,000. It goes again to educate more orphans, to keep them from the verge of the very types of slavery and crime that we've been talking about on the show today. By January of 2005, she's able to officially found Kids Caring for Kids as a 501c3 charity. You can find them at kidscaringforkids.org. That's kidscaring, numeral 4, kids.org. In the 10 years since Kendall founded her organization, she is now only $50,000 away from reaching her initial fundraising goal of $1 million. She plans to spend her summer raising the rest of it. And I kind of have a feeling that she's going to get there. She's now a 4th-year student at Georgetown University. She hopes to become a journalist, to travel the world to bring attention to other children's issues. Her organization provides health care, housing, education to children and orphans who are at risk of falling into prostitution, slavery, and crime. To find out how she does it, to see the specifics, you can go to her website at kidscaringforkids.org. You can read about the schools that they have built, and the schools that they fund, and all of the other materials and items that they send to give those kids a chance. I could start listing them and we'd be here for 4 hours. It's incredible. So go to kidscaringforkids.org. And Kendall Ciesemier, congratulations for joining the amazing ranks of our Peace Fund Radio Heroes of the Week.
Yeah, for sure.
That's awesome. How old is she now?
So awesome.
How old is she now?
She is a 4th-year student at Georgetown University. I believe she's 22 now. She was 10 years old when she first. I'm sorry, she was 11 years old when she first started.
So she's 50,000 short of $1 million now.
Yes.
Amazing, isn't it? When you really put your mind to it, it doesn't. I remember when I was a kid. A lot of the time, you're like, "Well, I'm one person. What can I do?" Our Kid Heroes of the Week show you that their one person turned into hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions, and have come together to actually help their cause. And I think that's absolutely fantastic.
I wish there was a way too that that society could look at what these kids are doing and say, okay, we're gonna help you out. Because sometimes it feels like some of these children are bearing the brunt of these causes. Not only are children the victims of these causes, but sometimes in these cases it's children who are leading the way, kind of leading the fight to help other kids. And I just feel like that's why I love this portion of the show, because I feel like we can get those causes out there and let people know what's going on. And you never know who might be inspired to pick up that torch and do their own thing.
Well, there's a couple of other organisations, John, that I'd like to mention. One is walkfree.org. It's a movement of nearly 9 million people everywhere fighting to end one of the world's greatest evils, modern slavery. They've got groups around the world working on the front lines against slavery. They aim to amplify and extend their efforts by gathering global membership, using social networks and new technologies, and organising campaigns and communities online and on the ground. They'll make the fight against slavery a real priority across the world. It's slavery in the modern world has got to be stopped. They're actually on Facebook as well, and we'll put that link on our site, facebook.com/walkfree.org. The other organisation I'd like to mention is the CNN Freedom Project. That's www.cnn.com/freedom. There are more slaves today at any point in human history. Go figure that. Why is it that we have become the most advanced in our walk through life or through existence, and yet we have the most slaves in any point in human history, and yet most of the public is unaware of this? So hopefully CNN can actually help change that and unleash an unmatched global reach and resources upon the battle against human slavery. It's wrong. It's out of order. It should be changed. It should be absolutely highlighted. CNN actually joins the fight to end modern-day slavery with an unmatched global reach that they have and resources. They want to spotlight the horrors of modern-day slavery and amplify the voices of those victims. So you can check out what they're doing at cnn.com/freedom. Very important. All the organizations we've spoke about this morning are dealing with things, as I was talking to you before, about the many forms of slavery. There are so many different forms of child slavery. As I mentioned, the chocolate slavery on the Ivory Coast, the forced labor in the mines, harvesting child organs, ladies and gentlemen, camel jockeys in the Persian Gulf, cannabis farms in Scotland, shrine slavery in West Africa, forced beggars of Senegal. It's too long to actually mention all of these and talk about all of these. I mean, Senegal has an estimated, as I said, 50,000 children to hit the streets to beg for money. They'll send them to Quranic schools called daras, where they're supposed to get an education guided by the Quran and overseen by a spiritual teacher known as the marabut. For many, this all happens, but too many schools are exposing the students that are forced to beg on the streets to earn money for their teachers. The students vary in age from 4 years old to 14 years old, and who are sent out on the streets to have a daily quota of money to bring back to the teachers. So let me ask that question. Okay, so you're going to take the kid, you bring them into school, you send them out of there to beg on the streets. Are they learning anything except street smarts?
They're not learning much.
One of the biggest things we've realized on this show is that education stops a vicious cycle that we put ourselves into. It allows us to have a thought process that we can make our own decisions. And education is very important. And yet, this is probably one of the worst ways I look at it, when you have spiritual teachers that, it ends up in their pockets and not in the schools and in the kids that need it.
And that's what I love about, the heroes of the week that we spoke about today. What do they all have in common? One of their biggest weapons is education. All of them. Neha, Kylesh, Kendall, they all choose education as one of their big tools of keeping these kids off the streets and giving them the power that they need to, again, make their own lives. In the cases of Kylesh, who helps these girls who were sexual slaves get the counseling that they need, and he gives them the power to make their own lives. It's fantastic.
Well, the thing of education is, here we take it for granted. Unfortunately, there are many instances in the US where education does not meet the standards that it should do, and we spend a lot of money on sending troops to different parts of the world to arm other people or train other people in how to be violent. I don't get that personally. I talked a second ago about this, about the daras in Senegal, but the Senegalese government, they're being suggested to start state-sponsored daras where traditional religious teachings can persist, but forced labor cannot. So there is a way to keep the traditions, I think, that are existing in certain countries, but adjust them slightly to a slightly different mentality that would stop harming people and young boys and young girls all over the world. Well, wow, it's 11:45 already. I can't believe we're 11:45 for us and quarter to 3 for you, John?
Yeah, 2:42 here.
Oh, there you go. So
time flies.
Time does fly. Ethan, what do you? I mean, you've been very quiet this morning. I know I've been ranting on this morning regarding this, but
you've been ranting on for good reason, though. This is a serious topic. This reminds me of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Where they had all the kids shackled in the dungeon and made them dig for those stones so they could, bring hell on earth, all that stuff.
I just can't. That is it. I mean, the child labor. We have a lot of responsibility as filmmakers and that to sort of, either highlight things like this or not use them in certain movies. I mean, you talk about Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom. They highlight the kids being chained, but there's no comment on it. It's just, that's a great idea, and maybe someone got an idea of actually to do that. So who knows?
You're saying it served as sort of inspiration?
I'm not saying it did. I'm just saying, showing that in a certain way, it could quite easily have done. Oh, that's a good idea. I haven't thought about that one yet. Let me go try that. So, we've got to be careful what we do and what we say a lot of the time. Very much like Facebook. I mean, I remember talking to my, at the time, 14-year-old nephew who was putting certain pictures of himself doing certain things on Facebook, and I said, "Are you insane? The entire world will see." He goes, "No, it won't. No. It's actually only people that I invite can see my pictures." I'm like, "Are you really
geniuses?"
And he would not listen to me. Would not listen to me. They knew absolutely. And a year later, he went, "Oh, you know what? I think you were right." And so, like, to me, it's too late. It's out there. The minute you put stuff out there, that's why I talked about earlier on this morning about when you put a photo of your child out there, be aware of the photo that you post. If you've got ones out there already that you've not doctored, remove them and re-upload them.
I would always say, despite what you think your privacy settings are, because that's really a bunch of nonsense, you can always get around that kind of thing, is any post you make it with the mindset that you're posting it to the world, basically.
Correct. So what do you
posting that? That's a billboard going over a very, very heavily congested traffic site.
Right.
So
we talked.
Quickly. Go ahead,
John. Well, I'm just saying, we talked this morning about how ISIS is using social media. You don't think that child traffickers are not using social media or scanning Facebook sites to go through things that they can actually find. I'm sure they have, it's as we said, it's the second largest criminal organization in the world, which has an immense revenue every year. You don't think they have people working day and night on finding these things? Mm-hmm. Anyway, John, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, speak on the subject of Facebook, talking about using Facebook the right way. I wanted to send congratulations this morning to the first winner of our biweekly photo contest, Tammy DeStefano. You can check out Tammy's photo and short essay on the Peace Fund blog at blog.thepeacefund.org and on our Facebook page. Remember, we have two, The Peace Fund and one for the show at Peace Fund Radio. The contest runs to the end of the year, so it's not too late for your submissions. Pictures are worth 1,000 words, and maybe there was a photo that opened your eyes to something that you'd never seen before, or a photo that opened your mind to something you never considered, or better yet, a photo that opened your heart to make you take action and want to change the world. What photos change forever the way you look at life? Find it, enter it into our contest, and tell others the effect it has had on you. You can find the rules for the contest on our Facebook page, facebook.com/The Peace Fund, and again, facebook.com/Peace Fund Radio. We're on Twitter, The Peace Fund and Peace Fund Radio. Our website, thepeacefund.org. Follow Adrian at AdrianPaul1. Follow Ethan at Combat Radio to find out about his Friday show, also called Combat Radio, in which celebrities, athletes, martial artists, musicians all come on to talk about the issues that are important to you. We've got a lot of great stuff out there, and people ask us all the time, what can we do to help? You can help us spread the word. You can also find out about some of our latest fundraising items on the peacefund.org, including our Peace Fund supporter wall, and you can also text a donation to 88588. Text Peace Fund, all caps, to 88588.
Now we're also going to be having we're going to start having a text. We've got a text to for an initiative every, once a month now. We're going to be looking at people that really need help in the short term, that we can actually help them in the long term by raising certain donations for them. And we will be putting something on our Facebook site and every site that we have on, including our website, for our this month's recipient, but I'll be talking about that in our next show, and I will have it up on our website probably by the end of this week, so that you can all see how we can actually start to help young people in our society. John, thank you for bringing that to us this morning. Ethan, thank you for helping us bring this show together, as well as all of you out there. Remember, we do actually exist on your donations. We need everybody's help. I do mention that we will be having a new Peace Fund poker event later in this year. We will be actually bringing it to you probably in September. We're working on dates right now. Last year's was to help Wells Bring Hope. And we were able to fund 2 wells. By doing that, we are hoping to actually highlight some of our other organizations this time, and that information will also be on our website. Thank you so much for joining us this week. In closing, I want to close with a quote by Kofi Annan, the former UN Secretary General. "Few human rights abuses are so widely condemned." I'll say that again. "Few human rights abuses are so widely condemned, yet so widely practiced. Let us make child labor a priority. because a child in danger is a child that cannot wait. This is Adrian Paul and Ethan Dettenmaier.
You're listening to Peace Fund Radio with Ethan Dettenmaier and Adrian Paul, right here on LA Talk Radio.